Brandon in.
Good afternoon. I'd like to call this meeting of the Wilson County Board of Education for September 21st, 2020 to order. Members of the board, we need to have an approval of the agenda.
Madam Chair,
Mrs. Powell,
I move we approve the agenda for September 21st, 2020, Wilson County Board of Education meeting. I second.
it has been moved by Mrs. Powell, seconded by Mrs. Barnes and Mr. Mercer that we approve the agenda for September 21st, 2020. Please record your vote. Mrs. Powell,
Aye.
Mrs. Barnes,
Aye.
Mrs. Boyette,
Aye.
Mr. Breen,
No.
Mr. Farmer,
Aye.
Mr. Mercer, and myself, Dr. Fitch, aye. Let the record reflect that the motion carries 6-1 with Mr. Breen casting the dissenting vote. Mrs. Barnes, we're going to ask if you would lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance to be followed by a moment of silence.
All right, please join me. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic
for which it stands,
one
one nation, under God, indivisible,
with
with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Members of the board, we have approval of the minutes that are called for. They are the minutes of the August 17th, 2020 regular board meeting, September 3rd, 2020 work session, September 14th, 2020 special board meeting. What is your pleasure?
Madam Chair,
Mrs. Barnes?
I move that we approve the minutes of August 17, 2020, regular board meeting, September 3rd, 2020, work session, and September 14, 2020, special board meeting.
Second.
It has been moved by Mrs. Barnes and seconded by Mr. Mercer that we approve the minutes of August 17th, 2020 regular board meeting, September 3rd, 2020 work session, and September 14th, 2020 special board meeting. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion, please record your vote. Mrs. Powell,
Aye.
Mrs. Barnes,
Aye.
Mrs. Boyette,
Aye.
Mr. Breen,
Aye.
Mr. Farmer,
Aye.
Mr. Mercer, myself, Dr. Fitch, aye. Let the record reflect that the motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Chairman's report. First of all, I'd like to thank 3C Store Fixtures for the wonderful graphics that now grace the windows at the front of our building. They look absolutely wonderful, and the job that they have done is absolutely outstanding. I'd also like to congratulate the NCSBA award nominees for and wish them the best of luck in their efforts. Mr. Mercer, that the board nominated for the Raleigh Dingman Award, to our Wilson County Commissioners for the award of County Commission of the Year, to this board for School Board Leadership Award, and for Excellence in Education Award. Again, the gentleman's agreement, and I'm not certain if there was something else that was added to that, just the gentleman's agreement, okay? And we wish each of these entities and individuals best wishes for the upcoming annual conference of the North Carolina School Boards Association, where the winners will be announced. I would like to take this opportunity to welcome back our staff. We know that today was the first day that our staff was back into the schools in force. And we know that the task of the online instruction may better be carried out in their classrooms, but they have done yeoman's work in getting that together in their home environments. Members of the board, I'd like for us to have consideration and to have discussion about our need to be leading by example. We've asked our teachers to come back into the buildings. We are looking at the possibility of our students coming back into the buildings for instruction. And we have a need possibly to come back for face-to-face meetings. We know that we will do whatever is necessary to keep everybody safe and distanced. But please, let's have a discussion on that for ourselves so that our staff and our families can see that we are doing the same thing that we are asking them to do, which is to come back. I'd like to have a response to an article that was in the paper recently following our last board meeting in regard to our athletic facilities at Beddingfield and Hunt. And I think we are going to have a need for a special meeting in regards to this issue. Let me first and foremost thank the county commissioners for their discussion and their thought that has probably prompted us to come back to have another meeting for this. At the last meeting, Mrs. Boyette read a statement which found its way into the paper in regard to the action that we took for a 6-lane track, in acknowledging that she had indeed voted with the rest of the board for the 6-lane track and not the 8-board track. And her statement that we were not the architects and we did not have the answers. And as much as that is true, we acted on behalf of our constituents and our supporters, namely the county commissioners, in working to be good stewards of the funds that they provided for us. One of the comments that Mrs. Boyette made was that the most common reason that people give for moving away from our schools and to other schools within the community was that they were, whether they were coming from somewhere else or they were here in Wilson, was in relation to the athletic facilities. And she specifically cited Wilson Preparatory Academy's new athletic facilities. Having had the opportunity since then to at least ride by their school, they do have a wonderful looking track. But I didn't see anything else out there with their track. I saw no bleachers. I saw no field house. I saw no concession stands. And those are things that we have, even though our facilities may not be as new as they are. I don't think that they are the state of the art comparison that needs to be made. We do need to make sure that we have, when the county commissioners have asked us to readdress this particular issue, I do think we may not have spelled out all of the hidden costs associated. Now, if we move to an 8-lane track on some of the fields, it's going to call for moving of lights, which are the metal light poles on concrete pads. That is a cost that has not been factored into any of that. We do need to be mindful of the ADA issues that arose as we started to examine this particular issue of the number of lanes for our facilities. Mrs. Boyette was one who pointed out the fact that there were some ADA considerations, and ADA being Americans with Disabilities Act, and that she and others actually sit on the track that's there. We have had the discussion that with a 6-lane track, we have seen facilities or school systems that have a central athletic complex where the major track meets and all athletics, whether football or the like, use that one facility. For multiple schools, many more than the 3 that we have here in Wilson County, with that one facility serving as the conduit for all of the athletic events. Mr. Farmer pointed out that in a conference training in San Antonio, Texas, he had the opportunity of viewing such an operation. There are other school systems within the state of North Carolina that utilize that same concept. Beddingfield, I believe, has hosted a regional track meet in the past with a 6-lane track. And there are other issues that have to be looked at as we consider still being good stewards of what is provided for us. We also, or I asked at our September 14th meeting to have Mr. Letchworth, Mr. Tillman, and Dr. Mills make contact with Musco Lighting to evaluate our lighting needs, both for the football fields as well as the baseball field at Fike. So there are so many moving parts to this puzzle. I would like for us, if we are going to have further discussion as the county commissioners have asked us to do, that we not only look at the cost for the 8 lanes, but all of the costs that are involved with moving from a 6-lane to an 8-lane track. This all started because of the visit that the county commissioners had with us in looking at our facility needs. And of special concern was a drop-off at the Hunt track site. So again, we work to be good stewards of the funds that were given to us. And if the county commissioners are willing to add more money in order to help us make these 8 lanes, then they need to know the entire story about all of the costs that are involved. So pointing those things out, that completes the chairman's report. And Dr. Mills, I'll turn it over to you for the superintendent's report.
Madam Chair, I wanted to begin by thanking all of our students and staff and families again for their continued hard work and flexibility as we're dealing with online teaching and learning. I know it's very challenging, and it is nice to see everyone working together. And it is something we're having to work through as we go, like everyone else right now. At the end of my report, I'm going to talk about the governor's most recent announcement just briefly, but I want to run through a few events and updates that's happened since our last board meeting. I too wanted to thank 3C Store Fixtures for their incredible generosity. They designed and donated the window graphics for the central office building right outside these boardroom doors. I think what's the best thing about it is it incorporates those pictures of our students and their daily lives. It shows everyone who visits or drives by what we focus on. They mirror the banners we have up here in the boardroom right now. But 3C does a lot for Wilson and our community, and we really appreciate them. So if you get a chance to stop by or you see them out and about, please tell them thanks. We're going to do some other things to make that really pop behind those that glass, so be able to look out for that. On September 8th, we added additional meal sites in the community where families can walk up and get a lunch and a breakfast for the next day. Breakfast the next day, but lunch now for children ages 1 through 18. We've got guidance that allowed us to extend the summer feeding program, and we're very appreciative of that from on high coming down. Their sites are in addition to the 23 school sites that we're running right now as well. Those are curbside meals, and you've seen some pictures of those floating around. Our child nutrition staff do an amazing job and pulling all that together and making it available to our folks. Our own school system staff have served at the 11 locations for the first couple of weeks. And today, we had community volunteers who started helping us today. I think Mr. Mercer's been out and as to model some of that behavior as well. And I want to thank Dr. Williams for his leadership in pulling that together, and our Mary Catherine Talton, our child nutrition director, for making that a reality. Took transportation, took child nutrition, and just a lot of commitment from others. And we're so appreciative of the extension of that for our families and our community. So if you get a chance, stop by one of those sites and stick your head in. I think people really appreciate that. Quick update on 2 grants. In January, we received a Safe Schools grant from the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction. Covered a lot of areas, including a little over $65,000 to contract with a licensed mental health service provider to provide in-school therapy for district schools. The intent of the funding was to manage crisis prevention, in addition to supporting social workers, nurses, and other staff members. And COVID has made it difficult for these services right now. But our provider, Pride in North Carolina, has still made really large strides in the services they were providing. Just from February to June, they provided 79 students with services. So we're appreciative of that partnership and look forward to getting that going again. We also recently heard about a grant among some school systems in my RESA that I sit on that Duke University received to provide COVID-related data to school systems. Originally, the grant was only for several school districts, but there's been enough interest among other districts to include others. We have expressed an interest in being part of that grant. Dr. Williams has been following up with that. So we would have access to specific COVID-related data, whether we participate or not, but certainly we would like to be a part of that. So we're waiting for confirmation, and that'll be something we'll be able to share some more about at a later time. You may have seen on August the 19th, which seems like a long time ago now, the Wilson Times, Drew, this is a shout out for the Wilson Times, that hosted the video conference Wilson in Black and White, Race, Prejudice, and Privilege as part of its community conversation series. The panelists included our very own Darden Middle School principal, Jennifer Parker. She did a great job representing us, and it was a really powerful discussion. And since then, the second community conversation installment was September 9th, and myself and Mr. Breen were part of the discussion on health, safety in schools. And it was nice to have an opportunity to share information and participate in that group and hear from other local leaders as part of that conversation as well. I also wanted to take a second to recognize folks from our driver's education program for offering the district's very first virtual driver's ed class. That doesn't mean folks don't have to drive. This is a classroom class. As a parent of a beginning driver, I can assure you we want folks to spend their time driving. But Wilson County Schools is one of only 6 school districts statewide that's offering the course in an online format. Scott Thompson and others in the driver's ed staff worked with Mr. Linden and principals and pulled this together over a period of time. And the behind the wheel training is still done in person with face coverings and extensive sanitizing in between drivers. But I wanted to thank our driver's ed instructors for going outside the norm and figuring out some things and allowing our students and their families to get back on track for driver's ed. They were not able to drive for several months due to COVID, and if anybody's been by the DMV as I have, that's just as cumbersome right now with other things going on. But this will help us catch back up and stay on track. So hats off to them for figuring that out. I mentioned earlier I wanted to just touch on the governor's announcements from September 17th that reflected some changes for previous guiding that was affecting our planning that we talked about from the start for reentry of schools. The guidance now is that elementary schools can now return October 5th when districts believe they're ready. And the guidelines for social distancing in classrooms and buses is a recommendation and not a requirement. That's for elementary schools. Middle and high schools still operate under the guidelines for social distancing on buses and in classrooms and can only transition to Plan B. I believe that this change needs to be reviewed by the board, and there's some information that we're pulling together right now that will need to be a part of your conversation. We're surveying staff and parents right now on regarding the return to school. If you have specific questions, Dr. Wilson can share those really briefly, but I believe we need to have a work session to share that data and go through the reentry plans based on these new guidelines. I would like to suggest September 30th to give us enough time to finish the survey, since this just happened last week, and give us time to pull the data and have the survey window. And that would allow us to incorporate that data, which I think is really important to hear from parents and staff about what they would like. So that's one recommendation I have for a work session upcoming. That'll be right after the survey period. And also, I think we need a work session to talk about the conversations that I have with the county manager regarding the commissioner's questions about additional costs for an 8-lane track for Bettyfield and Hunt. I contacted David Adler with CPO Architects. That's the architect firm that's representing the board's work in that area, to try and get more precise figures for them about the cost and revisit that, re-examine it. I also think we need a work session on that. I do not have a date in mind for that one, but I'm gotten some updated figures today. Nothing really changed a whole lot, but I've got to have time to go through it. I got them late this afternoon, but they did mention the estimates were pretty straightforward already, but there was a few things they edited based on their last review. So I think we need to have a conversation about that in a work session. And that's all I have, Madam Chair.
All right. Members of the board, you have heard a report from the superintendent asking for a special board meeting for September the 30th in regards to our reentry plan. I believe surveys started today, Dr. Wilson. And so this would give them time to get the surveys back, to get to analyze the data and do a little more work in that preparation. What is your pleasure in regard to this request from the superintendent?
Madam Chair,
Mrs. Powell?
I move that we have a work session regarding school reentry on September 30th, 2020.
Is there a second?
What date was that?
September the 30th?
What time?
That will be up to the board.
I think we need to have a time that's, so everyone can be present, as best as we can.
Would 4 o'clock work?
I'm open, I think.
I have a question before voting, Dr. Fitch.
Mrs. Barnes?
Will that work session be only on the reentry plan, or will that include discussion on the 8-track tapes, tracks? I know that Dr. Mills mentioned both needing to have a work session. So will that date be inclusive of both or just one?
We can do both, no problem.
He indicates that we can do both, no problem.
Dr. Mills, do you believe you will have an adequate amount of time? Don't want to, the reentry plan could take some time for the conversation. I know you originally envisioned having 2. I just don't want you to be.
So to the board's pleasure, what y'all would like to do in terms of your time, I do think the reentry plan discussion is going to be lengthy.
If the reentry plan is going to be lengthy, I think that needs to have its time without being rushed, so that we can have adequate time for discussion. So this can be 2 meetings that we're going to have, one for reentry and one for athletic fields, the lane tracks. So is it your pleasure that we do just the reentry plan on the 30th, since that is the date certain that he has asked for?
Yes.
I think it would be better just to deal with that.
All right. Well,
Second.
then it has been moved by Mrs. Powell, seconded by Mr. Farmer, that we have a special board meeting or work session on September the 30th at 4:00 p.m. for the purpose of discussion of our reentry plans. Is there any discussion?
Madam Chair,
Mrs. Boyette?
will the 30th meeting allow us to stay in line with a reentry plan as we voted for after the first 9 weeks for elementary students?
In the sense of,
In other words, that's the 30th, and our, the date that we had voted to delay the reopening to, wasn't that October is it 15th, 16th? What was that day?
The
21st.
21st of
21st.
October,
21st?
yes, ma'am.
21st, yes.
Okay, so that would, the plan that we will hear on the 30th and discuss, that would allow for, that to happen by the 21st?
Oh, yes, ma'am.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
I felt like we wanted to go ahead and have this meeting sooner than later based on the governor's information and the fact that that might change what the board wants to do, and that will give us plenty of time to let people know and make those plans.
Yeah, I agree. I was just trying to make sure that that did indeed give us time.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right, hearing no other discussion, please record your vote. Mrs. Powell?
Aye.
Mrs. Barnes?
Aye.
Mrs. Boyette?
Aye.
Mr. Breen? Mr. Farmer?
Aye.
Mr. Mercer?
Uh,
Myself, Dr. Fitch, aye. Let the record reflect that the motion carries unanimously. We will be meeting on September the 30th at 4:00 p.m. for the purpose of discussing Wilson County School System's reentry plan. All right. What is your pleasure in regard to further discussion for the track situation?
does it need to be after the 30th?
Doesn't have to be, I don't think.
He doesn't think that it has to be.
I mean, we normally set aside Mondays. I wouldn't, for conversation's sake, I wouldn't be opposed to Monday of next week.
I think that's fine.
So Monday of
Second, I
next,
agree with that.
that's the 28th.
That's 28th, that work fine.
So we will be meeting on Monday and Wednesday of next week. All right.
Yep.
Is the same hour of 4:00?
Yes, that's good.
All right. So we need a motion, please.
Okay, I move we meet to discuss the track projects on September the 28th at 4:00 p.m.
Second.
It has been moved by Mr. Mercer, seconded by, was that Mr. Farmer?
Yes.
That we meet on Monday, September the 28th at 4:00 p.m. for the purpose of discussion of the track projects. Is there any discussion?
Madam Chair,
Mrs. Barnes?
does that mean on our agenda, we have item B and action items that we'll be looking at the architectural services for the tracks? Does that mean we're going to table that, or we're going to continue that discussion today?
No, ma'am. Those are the actual contracts that we need to have signed.
Okay. All right.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, please record your vote. Mrs. Powell?
Aye.
Mrs. Barnes?
Aye.
Mrs. Boyette?
Aye.
Mr. Breen? Mr. Farmer?
Aye.
Mr. Mercer?
Uh,
And myself, Dr. Fitch, aye. Let the record reflect that the motion carries unanimously. We are now at the portion of our agenda that calls for public input. We have 10 persons who will be, who submitted emails or letters that are to be read. Let me remind the readers of the letters that each person is granted 3 minutes for their presentation. So for your reading of the letters or emails, Mr. McPherson is going to be the timekeeper, and we'll let you know when the time is up. The portion of the meeting is to hear matters of interest from the public. However, obscene or vulgar statements, personal attacks, and statements reasonably perceived to be disruptive or immediately threatening to the orderly operation of the meeting shall not be permitted. The first person signed up is Larnell Toms regarding North Carolina driver's education and licensing.
The law is just a suggestion that I sent to the governor to help out the driver's ed kids that are being left behind. Thank you for your time. Suggestion. If a kid passes driver's ed, has her learner's permit, is 16 years of age, and has completed their verified 60 hours of driving, they should get their driver's license. Right now, because of COVID, driver's ed is backed up, and kids that were 15 waiting to take the class are now 16 and still waiting to take the course. So by the time they take the course, schedule the learner's permit a month or two out, and get the permit, they are now close to 17. Now, with the year waiting with learner's permit, they are close to 18 years old. During all the time in between, parents have to drive kids to jobs, to school events, and this is all because of the virus. I just don't want these kids to be left behind, and I don't want these issues to be lost in 2021. As the vaccines are coming in and things seem normal, there will be a ton of kids that were 15 when this virus hit that will forever be impacted.
Okay, thank you. The next correspondence comes from Richard C. Harris regarding reopening schools.
I am calling on our Wilson County Board of Education to consider Governor Cooper's options announced today for reopening our schools. My wife and I are blessed to be able to help our child as much as possible while still trying to work during remote learning. But it has been and continues to be very hard on our family. Our third graders deserve better than sitting in front of a computer alone trying to learn new concepts that they will use for the rest of their lives. This is such a crucial time for them academically, socially, and emotionally. Please listen to the parents of this county and do what is best for our children. They need to be at school with their teachers and friends. I am thankful for the teachers at New Hope Elementary and all they are doing for our students. They are all rock stars and deserve more credit than they will ever receive. They are working together as a team to do the best they can for all Wilson County students. And it is time for the Wilson County Board of Education to do the same.
All right, thank you. The next correspondence is from Aaron Verton, School Board comment.
Ladies and gentlemen of the board, I implore you to bring our elementary students back into school. I am the parent of 2 children in the school system, one of which is an EC student who attends a self-contained classroom. I can tell you that remote learning is not working for my EC child. We attend the session and do the work, but really just as a check mark. I've had to hire 2 people to actually teach my child, as he needs to be writing with a pencil and working on spatial order, not using a finger to trace letters and lines. The schoolwork is a checkbox, not education. I think of the kids like my son whose parents are working and cannot supplement their child's education with additional activities or resources. These kids are already behind. This is going to put them so far behind the mark. I don't have a kindergartner, but I can't imagine how this is working. Elementary kids' brains are still developing organizational skills. They need a structured environment. If people can go to the grocery stores, restaurants, and daycares, our kids can go to school.
The next is from Michael Dean, reopening K-5.
Good evening. I am writing to you in support of opening schools for students in the K-5 category, as well as special education. I am writing to you from a different perspective as a father as well as a husband of an educator. It is my opinion that virtual learning is providing a disservice to both my wife and my child. My child is in second grade at New Hope Elementary. She is a good student and loves to learn. Every day since school has reopened, she has asked when she can go back to class to be with her peers. We have been very fortunate to take advantage of the offer of the school system to provide teacher assistant to guide her in the virtual learning. But it just is not the same. The TA has to juggle schedules for multiple schools, and it seems each kid is on a different schedule. Even with this amazing support system in place, my child has missed multiple classes due to confusing schedules. Other assignments have been turned in incomplete because one school is requiring something completely different from other schools. My daughter is routinely confused when doing her work, not because she doesn't understand the assignment, but because there isn't a teacher around to ask for clarification. We are extremely lucky that we do not have to make a decision between sending our school to school and going to work. I am concerned to think about what those kids who are left at home may be experiencing or what level of learning is actually going on. On top of the academic concerns, I have major concerns on what virtual learning is doing for her mental state. Kids need to be around other kids. They need the opportunity to associate with others and to play. This is how we develop as people, and the grade school age is a major time for social development. As for the perspective of an educator's spouse, I feel like virtual learning has been twice as hard on them as it has on the students. My wife teaches high school. For the first 3 weeks of school, she came home with migraines to the point she would be in bed crying each day after school. Now, these migraines could have been caused by the accumulation of dust in the ductwork that never seems to get clean, but I feel like it was the stress of virtual learning. My wife spends hours working on ways to make her class interesting for her students. This usually takes the form of hands-on lessons, some of which have been highlighted on your Facebook page. But without meeting in person, she has been reduced to lecture and note-taking. She still spends hours each night trying to find ways to engage with her students. But without being in person, it just doesn't work. I know that opening is only being considered for K through 5 at this time, but I am sure that her experience would be universal among all Wilson County teachers. Wilson County Schools has some of the finest educators and support staff in the state. I believe that they can accomplish anything that is set before them, and that opening a safe
Time.
and effective learning environment.
Thank you. Jessica Miller, returning to school.
I would like to express my opinion regarding returning to in-person instruction. I believe the best approach for Wilson County Schools at this time is to return to in-person instruction under Plan A per Governor Cooper's guidelines. I fully understand the risk and extra work that will go into returning to school. However, the needs and rewards far outweigh these risks, especially for children in grades K through 3. I have a first grader who thrives on structure, routine, and thoroughly enjoys learning. He wants and needs to learn. He also needs to learn how to learn. Children in these age groups are just beginning their academic career, are already at risk of falling behind, and desperately need this in-person instruction. Completing a few assignments, worksheets on a computer every day is not a long-term solution. Children in these age groups are less likely to get sick, and if they do, they tend to recover quickly. With no restrictions on busing under Plan A, there is no reason why these students should not be able to return to school as normal. The longer students are kept home or on a rotation, the longer these students are getting behind and being done a disservice. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Beth Thomas, school reopening.
I know you will make a decision based on your view of what is best for the children, parents, staff, and administrators of Wilson County Schools. But as a working parent, I urge you to allow the younger children the opportunity to attend school in person. Nothing can compare to hands-on learning. With a child in the first grade, I think it is best for my child to be around other children with social distancing protocols in place. My family is willing to abide by whatever rules would get us back in the building and off the computer. Thank you for your time.
Anna Brock, Wilson County Schools reopening.
As the governor stated, we have the option to go to Plan A for schools. I strongly feel that the students need to return to school in person. The students need to have the social interaction and learn in the classrooms. My child is in kindergarten and does not benefit from learning on the computer all day. She is too young to be on the computer all day and needs to be in a classroom. It is important that these students return to a classroom to learn and be around others. Please consider the students returning, and if you have to have safety protocols such as masks, I am sure parents will do everything they can to make sure their children follow this, whatever it takes to get our children back in a classroom. Also, take in consideration that most parents work during the day. This also puts a strain on everything. We can't work and keep the younger ones on a computer and actually expect them to learn this way. Thank you for your time.
Tanya Skinner, School Board Meeting.
I'm a parent of an 11th and 9th grader at Fighting High School, and I have a stepson in the 5th grade at New Hope. To say remote learning has been a challenge for 2 full-time working parents would be an understatement. I understand the recent press conference is related to K-5 students. However, I've heard there is a possibility high school students will be in remote learning for the entire year. I really feel the voice for the high school population does not matter. Some think they can work better independently and they do not need to be in school. That could not be farther from the truth. We are not preparing our kids for college. We are not teaching them good study habits by keeping them at home. My 9th grader has 2 classes per day. The Google Meet lesson is maybe 30 minutes to an hour. How are they getting all the instructional time they need to be proficient in anything? Not to mention the integrity of test taking because they have all their notes to use for a test, which lets them think that cheating is okay because I'm at home and the notes are here. I know teachers are doing the best they can with the circumstances, but we should be focused on the students. My 9th grader needs the structure of going to school, sitting in a classroom with in-person instruction, and being around his classmates. Wilson County Schools lost almost 500 students because parents had to make a decision to work or send their children to school, some taking on additional expenses to send them to private schools. Those families that could not afford private school tuition were forced to rely on older siblings or remote learning camps, again at an additional cost. It seems to me with the loss of students and the number that possibly selected virtual learning, which will lower the student population in each school, please do not keep these students home any longer. My 5th grader said he cannot wait to go back to school. He wants to be in his classroom with his teachers and classmates. My 11th grader is taking pre-calculus strictly remote, and I'm in the process of getting her a tutor because of the poor instruction. Shoving worksheets and websites at children is not teaching them anything. Please consider all grades, all students, and not restrict your decisions in the future to the lower grades. These are the individuals that will be leading our country one day. We need to teach them and prepare them for life. Since March, life has been disrupted, and it is not okay to continue to fail our children on the one thing we hold dear, their education. Thank you for allowing me to vent a little and voice my concern.
Lee Bryant, sending our children back to school.
Thank you for taking the time to read my letter. I would like to start by saying I am an ICU nurse and have been working specifically in the COVID ICU unit since the onset of the pandemic. I want my child, a 1st grader, back in school, back full time. It is our responsibility to seriously take into account the overall health of our children. Children, especially the elementary levels, need to be in school. They need it not just for their educational needs, but for their developmental and psychological needs as well. Due to my husband and I both working full-time jobs, along with the stress of mine, we had no choice but to enroll and pay for her to attend a remote learning camp. I do not like remote learning, but have been surprisingly happy with how well the teachers have navigated during this time. I think they have been given the appropriate amount of work. However, they are far behind from where they would be if in-person classes were going on. As a 1st grader just barely able to read, how can she be expected to read directions and follow through with her work? She needs assistance. All these children do. In a normal classroom setting, the teacher can see what the child needs. You cannot accomplish this remotely, not to mention how difficult the technology side has been. We constantly have difficulty logging into live sessions and staying live. My heart aches for the children being expected to do this on their own. As mentioned, my child is in a remote learning camp. Her dad and I chose to do this mostly so she could be around other children. The lasting effect of social isolation was not something we wanted to risk. I urge you to consider sending these children back full-time. They need to be in school. They do not need to balance between a week of remote and a week of in-person. If they can stay healthy in a remote learning environment, they can easily stay healthy in a school where they belong. We did have the option to send our daughter to private school this year, but we chose to stick it out with public schools. I just hope the right decision will be made for the overall health of these children. A face-to-face classroom is where they deserve to be and where they need to be. Thank you for your time and dedication to the children of our community.
Amanda McCullum Bennett, September 21st, Board of Ed Public Input.
My name is Amanda Bennett, and I'm the dance teacher at Hunt High School. I want to thank you for your guidance and acknowledge that I know each decision you make is with the best interest of the students and our county in mind. And at this moment in time, there are no easy decisions. Today, I address this board not from an employee perspective, but from that of a parent. My son is a current kindergarten student enrolled in the Spanish Immersion program at Frederick Douglass Elementary School. My reason for making this statement to each of you is simple. I believe that it is imperative to return to face-to-face instruction for the education of the smallest among our schools. I do not make this statement because I am unsatisfied with the quality of instruction that my son has received. I can tell you without a doubt, the staff at Frederick Douglass, like each of you, are doing everything within their power to make the best out of an impossible situation. Instead, I make this statement because Seesaw is a developmentally inappropriate platform for instruction for K-2. It is impossible for students to navigate work posted on Seesaw on their own, and they must have a caregiver who is comfortable enough with technology to assist. The need to log out and back into different classes and different assignments means that this caregiver must be available for the majority of the day. I make this statement because there is no technological substitute for my child being able to hug a friend at the beginning of or the end of the school day. During a week when I had to work remotely from home, my son actually created a friend for himself in his bedroom by stuffing a sweatshirt and a pair of pants with other clothes and drawing a face on a basketball. When I asked him why he did that, he stated that he could only see his friends at school on the screen, so he wanted a friend to have in person. As his mother, I tried to remain strong, as every picture of what his first day of kindergarten would look like was erased and rewritten. This, however, brought me to tears. As of last week, Governor Cooper has stated that schools have an option to utilize Plan A, B, or C. I firmly believe that Governor Cooper looked at the same data that I did to inform his decision. The NFHS states that in Wilson County, there have been 187 cases of SARS-CoV-2 diagnosed in children ages 0 through 17 since March. That's 9% of the overall number, and in consistency with the statewide data, 0% have resulted in death. Each family should have the opportunity to make the decision that's the best fit their family. Those that feel the best decision for their family is continued virtual learning have that opportunity with the Virtual Academy. At this point in time, families like myself, whose choice would be to send their child to school, do not have that option unless we make the decision to send our child to private school. I make the firm stance that we cannot communicate to DPI and our federal government that virtual learning is an adequate.
Time.
Right. Members of the board, we have an option to respond to the comments that have been made. I think some of those will be looked at and addressed as we meet on the 30th, once the surveys are in. But I'm going to ask if the administration would respond to each of those persons who have addressed the board through this format. Next on our agenda is the discussion, information, action items. We have 5 items for information, operations, research, and education services, National Federation of State High School Association Network School Broadcast Programs, update on the Wilson County Schools capital outlay projects for 2019-2020, Newcomers Virtual Summer Camp, and 21st Century Community Learning Center grant with the spot. Dr. Mills, I believe we'll let you get the first item, the operations or ORED
Yes.
report.
Madam Chair, board members, the Thomas Dudley and Terry Carlson have just joined us from ORED, and they're going to share information from the land use study and the other information from the integrated planning work that they did previously. And so they're joining us remotely. Thomas and Terry, can y'all hear us okay?
Hello, can you hear me, Dr. Mills?
Yes.
Gotcha. Yes, sir. So I'm going to turn it over to you guys.
Okay, so is there going to be someone with the school system running the PowerPoint, or?
I can run it or you can run it. Which would you prefer?
I have my notes up in front of me, so if you wouldn't mind running it, that would be perfect.
Okay, let me pull it up.
Really appreciate that.
1 second. Which one would you like first, Thomas? The talking points, let's see, the draft or the land use study?
It should be the PDF. I'm sorry, I don't have it. It's Wilson 1920
Got it.
underscore the date and then draft 2.
All right, got it. All right, let me pull it up, share the screen.
Is that the presentation that was placed in our packets, Dr.
It
Mills?
is. Mhm.
Members of the board, you have that. It was the Wilson County Schools IPSAC and land use study presentation, PowerPoint.
And should come around. There you go.
Yes.
Anyone see that? Wilson County Schools, IPSAC, and land use study?
Yes.
All right, let me shut this down here. Okay.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Dr. Mills. Let's see, so to introduce myself here, Dr. Fitch, other members of the board, I'm Thomas Dudley with the Operations Research and Education Laboratory, part of NC State University and the Institute for Transportation Research and Education. My colleague, Mr. Terry Carlson, and I are here speaking with you today to discuss the findings of our IPSAC process, or the Integrated Planning for Schools and Community Studies, which we have been working on over the past several months here. Dr. Mills, if you want to do like Control L, I believe we'll make that full screen.
There you go.
Perfect. Okay, and if you would go to the next slide, please. Great.
Let's see, this one?
This one, that's correct. Yes, thank you. So first, I'll give a brief introduction to my organization that Terry and I work for, because this is the first time we've had the pleasure of working together. From there, Mr. Carlson will discuss the land use study, the process that he's gone through, and then also the results of that component of the study. I'll then discuss your membership forecast looking forward over the next 10 years. And then we'll look into next steps, a discussion and potential questions and answers from there. If you would go to the next slide, please, Dr. Mills. Thank you. So ITRE, for short, is the Institute for Transportation Research and Education. We're based on NC State University's campus in Raleigh. And ITRE has been conducting research related to transportation for over 40 years in North Carolina. Next slide, please. ORED, which is our little corner of ITRE, is an unbiased third-party evaluation research group that helps depoliticize the school planning process. And the way that we're able to do that is through mathematical modeling, GIS analysis, and operations research. If you're curious to learn more about our program, you'll see our website listed there at the bottom. Next slide, please. So the IPSAC that you've heard mentioned previously, that's Integrated Planning for School and Community. And that's the umbrella term for the services that we provide for districts across the state. That includes land use studies, like you'll hear about from Mr. Carlson in a moment, including GIS analysis, which is Geographic Information Systems, membership forecast, both at the district level as well as the school level. And then we offer 2 types of optimization for school configurations as well as attendance zones. And on to the next slide here. With that, I will hand it over to my colleague, Mr. Terry Carlson.
All right, thank you, Thomas. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. Members of the board, as Thomas mentioned, my name is Terry Carlson, and I am a land use planner with BORED. I conducted the land use study portion of this project with Wilson County Schools, and I'm here today just to discuss some of those findings for the land use study. So what you have in front of you right now is the interview roster for the Wilson County Schools land use study. So from this, you can see that we had valuable assets on both sides of the county and on the city of Wilson. From the residential development data that we obtained, we got that from Ms. Janet Holland with the Land Development Office within the city of Wilson. And on Wilson County side of things, we spoke to Mr. Aaron Chalker with the Planning Department with Wilson County. With that, we also like to speak to water and sewer folks. A lot of times, water and sewer infrastructure helps us determine where future residential development is going to go. Obviously, if that infrastructure is there, that's a really good indicator of where developers can go with that construction. So on that side, we spoke to Mr. Ronald Ford with Wilson County Director of Water Services. And on the city of Wilson side, we spoke to Mr. Barry Parks, also the Director of Water Resources. Aside from that, we like to round things out with a representative from transportation. You'll see Bobby Liverman on here. He's been a valuable asset to ORED in the past with other districts, with other projects and whatnot. So we wanted to definitely reach out to Bobby again as Wilson County falls into his district as an NCDOT engineer. And then to round things out, finally, we spoke to Ms. Jennifer Lance with Wilson Economic Development Council. And that just helps us understand the economic trends and indicators going on in Wilson County. Next slide, please. This slide is just kind of meant to get the key takeaways from the land use study and some of the growth factors going on in Wilson County. So first off, we have the modernization of the city of Wilson, specifically speaking to the on-demand public transportation service provided by VIA that's going to be coming to the area very soon. This is a little bit better service compared to the traditional fixed route public transportation that we find in a lot of other areas of North Carolina right now. Additionally, we also have the broadband internet provided by the city of Wilson coming soon. That is in comparison to the traditional internet provider not wanting to partner with the city, and so that's a big improvement to the residents of the city of Wilson. We're speaking to Ms. Lance with the Economic Development Council. We found that since 2016, more than $600 million had been invested in the county through employment opportunities. And this is just a highly valuable, trait to Wilson County. These investments came from companies like Merck, Bridgestone, and Fresenius Kabi. And all these investments totaled to over 1,600 jobs for the residents of Wilson County. And then we also had a large swath of residential land ready for development. And so what I mean by that is just we had, Wilson County is still relatively a largely rural county in comparison to its neighbors like Johnson County, who's quickly becoming a more urban atmosphere. And so with this, we had a slight movement towards higher density development, specifically towards McConnell Acres, which you'll see here in a little bit. They're moving towards more of a 2 units per acre development, rather than the rest of the county is more towards a less than 1 home per acre development. So that's a shift that we're seeing in the near term. And then to round things out, we had abundant water and sewer capacities. So we had a lot of capacities in the sense of drinking water and wastewater treatment that could provide well for future development. And then to finish things out here, we had a broad range of highway accessibility. As I'm sure you're all aware, we had US 264, which runs east and west across the county, providing accessibility to Raleigh and beyond, and then I-95 providing, transportation services up and down the East Coast for those industry goods and services that we were talking about up above. Next slide, please. And so here is the kind of bread and butter of my project. This is the development inventory, and here you can see that we list 24 developments that were identified throughout those interviews that I mentioned earlier. And so here, this list is organized from the number of available lots in that second column. It's organized from the largest development down to the smallest, and this culminates to about 1,500 lots or homes or units available for development in the next 5 to 10 years. So a lot of growth coming to Wilson County in the near-term future. Next slide. And then finally here what we can do with that residential development information and the interviews with the local practitioners is we can take all that development and we can put it into a geospatial atmosphere and understand where it's going on the school level. And so if you look at this map, that purple kind of background there, where a lot of the orange developments are, those orange developments are, as I'm saying, the developments that we obtained through the interviews. And from this, we wanted to show that, 90% of your residential developments that we've identified are within that Jones Elementary attendance school boundary. So a lot of majority of the developments and a lot of that development is in that area of Jones Elementary attendance boundary. So at this point, unless there's any questions, this concludes the land use study portion of the project, and I'll now turn it back to Mr. Dudley.
Next slide, please. Thank you, Dr. Mills, and thank you, Mr. Carlson. So as part of any long-term demographic forecast, the resident live births are a key component. And that's especially a true statement when it comes to demographic forecasts that project student age populations. And you'll see over the past 6 years, and this is the most recent data that we have, within the county, your resident live birth information or data is stable. To be specific, we're talking about the number of births that are to mothers that are residents of the county. So if a baby is born just outside the county at a hospital, but the mother is a resident that lives within Wilson County, that birth would count as part of the numbers that you see in front of you here. So this is a key indicator. It's stable over time, and you can see it has been in the past. So with that in mind, though, simultaneously, if you would go to the next slide here, please. At the same time, there's been a significant decline in your membership. So a loss of almost 1,400 students over the same time period. And that, to a large extent, can be directly attributable to charter impacts and new charter capacity that's been added over this time frame. If you would go to the next slide, please. So you have two existing charter schools, of course, Sally B. Howard and Wilson Prep. Both are around 1,000 students. And in this study and in this enrollment forecast that you see, we take into account additional capacity gains of roughly 200 students at each of these two schools. Sally B. Howard adding a high school component with roughly 200 students, and then Wilson Prep next year adding 200 seats. At the time that these presentation materials were developed, there was no additional charter applications that had been received by DPI for the 2021 or 21-22 school years. But since then, I checked just last week, and there's actually another charter school application that's come in for 2022. That's Empowerment Leadership Academy on Ashbrook Drive is the location for that, the current location that they listed as part of their application. And that has potential to also be a sizable charter school as well. So we'll continue to monitor the impacts of charter schools to your district. And again,
the charter school, please.
Yes, it's Empowerment Leadership Academy.
And the location.
What I have in front of me is that it's on Ashbrook Drive, which is, I believe, one word.
Thank you.
And we can follow up with the additional information that we have. We can coordinate on that as well. So the membership forecast that you see that goes forward over the next 10 years takes into account the additional students at Sally B. Howard and Wilson Prep, the additional 200 at each school, but it does not try to predict any new charter schools and where they could potentially go or anything that far out. So Dr. Mills, if you would go to the next slide here. Thank you. So this is your 10-year forecast looking district-wide at the entire system. And we've broken this down by elementary, middle, and high school. So the elementary is the blue line, high school is the red, and middle school is down at the bottom with the yellow. And you can see there's some ups and downs, some of the dynamics of how larger and smaller cohorts make their way through the system. And that's what we typically see, some ups and downs. High school declines, middle school does decline as well. Elementary, as it's shown here, does increase very slightly at the very tail end of the forecast, the far right, over in 2029. That would not take into account additional charter schools or other non-traditional capacity that could be added in that intervening time between now and then. Dr. Mills, if you would go to the next slide, please. This is the slide that I really like to show because I think it's a quick visual way of being able to demonstrate how your facilities are being used. So we have, really this is a utilization chart. So it's the number of students divided by the capacity of the school. A school level forecast looking forward 10 years where we have the capacity of the school in the white column. We have the current membership or the 1920 membership in the next column to the right. And then it goes forward over 10 years looking at what are the trends, what are the ups and downs that occur at these schools. And what you can see here is that there's a lot of dark green. There are a lot of schools that you have that are being, what we would define as being underutilized. And that's also the case as we look beyond just the elementary schools. If you would look to the next slide here. So on this slide, we have both the middle schools and the high schools as well. You have two schools that are currently beyond their design capacity, but those are both stable or declining in enrollment or will be over the next 10 years. So there are, so to speak, red flags about being under capacity or being over capacity in specific regions, things like that. It's more a discussion about the significant number of schools that you have that are underutilized. Dr. Mills, would you go to the next slide? And this is a great spatial way that we like to look at these types of charts because it acknowledges that geographic component that's so natural as part of this whole phenomenon. So as we look here at the elementary school level, we have one of these for each level. The coloring is the same, so the dark green indicates schools that are below 80% utilization. So again, that's just the number of students divided by the capacity of those facilities, and that's the current data that we have. And so you can see a lot of dark green here, central, south, northeast, the exception being New Hope in this. And of course, you can anticipate some amount of growth occurring within that Jones attendance boundary based on all the residential data that Mr. Carlson collected as part of the land use study component of this project. And you can see the impact on the previous slides in your packet. Next, we'll go to the middle school slide here. So similar story with several of the schools in the city itself, and then you do have over to the west, the exception of that was Springfield. That pretty much sums up that slide. And we also have an equivalent one for the high school, showing the underutilization over on the eastern sort of side of the district. So with that, I think we're going to go to the next slide here. And to sort of start the conversation here, we have three questions. First, what are the student enrollment trends that Wilson County Schools is facing over the next 10 years? Two, what challenges do those trends present for the district? 3, what steps should the board take to help address these long-range facility concerns? And so that concludes our formal presentation. So with that, I'll open it up more for discussion and Q&A.
Right. This is Dr. Fitch, and I want to go back to your slide, which was the land use study residential development permitting map, where you showed these developmental areas being within the Jones school district. But then when you come over to your elementary school utilization map, you show New Hope as being the school most at the utilization capacity as opposed to Jones. Why is that difference?
So it's the difference between what's on the ground today versus where things will be in the future. So New Hope is the school that, I mean, that would be looking just at the current membership data that you have for that school relative to its capacity.
Okay.
And then what we would expect is a significant, what will be a significant impact to Jones due to this development in the future.
Okay. So the permitting map is the future, the utilization maps are current.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
I had a question.
Mrs. Barnes, go ahead.
And my question was concerning the development names under the land use study development inventory. And I recognized a lot of the areas and many of them I did not. So there's no way of knowing for myself whether they're in East Wilson, West Wilson. I know that the Freeman Place is doing more development, and that is in East Wilson, but the remainder of them wasn't quite sure about some of them. I don't know whether you could help me with that or not, but.
Yeah, Ms. Barnes, I can take that one. Majority of them are what I'm gonna call the northwest corridor of Wilson County. Matter of fact, if we go back to the map that showed Jones Elementary, a lot of the orange polygons that you saw there, that's pretty much the culmination of development in Wilson County. And I'm looking at my map now that has the rest of the developments, and there's a few sprinkled out throughout the rest of the county, but it's maybe 4, one being all the way out towards the west, and then one in the southwest, and one out east, but majority of them are surrounding that Jones Elementary attendance boundary.
All right, thank you.
Other members of the board have questions?
Madam Chairman,
Mr. Farmer?
I'd like to direct this to anyone that's smart enough to figure it out. When you're talking about a geopolitical environment that we're in right now, where you've got people that are running for high office and you've got different parts of the legislature, and they've got 2 absolutely different thoughts on charter schools and schools of choice as opposed to public schools. How do you ascertain that into your formula?
Was that a question specifically for ORED?
Yes.
I think that's directed to Mr. Dudley or Mr. Carlson.
Yes, thank you. So the sort of distinction that we draw, the line that we draw in the sand is we know where existing charter schools are within the district. We know what their capabilities are, what their capacities are, and we've reached out to them and we know where, what additional seat gains they're going to have within the foreseeable future. And then we also keep track with whatever data and information is publicly available through through DPI and the Division of Non-Public Instruction. The more complicated and longer term analysis question is, how do you predict where a new charter would go in? And that is, it's not only a question of supply and demand in terms of number of students and supply and demand in terms of number of teachers. As you're getting to, it's also a policy question as well. That is a step beyond what we are sort of tasked with as an organization, and it's a very difficult question to navigate what would be the policy side of what you're describing. So we do not go to the additional step of trying to predict exactly where or how many additional new charter schools could come into the district. So as I was describing on that chart, what is predicted as a slight increase in your elementary school enrollment at the end of 10 years, that would be, assuming the potential for new charters to come in, that would be the highest that number could be, with the ongoing potential for there being additional charter schools to enter the district.
Madam Chair,
Mr. McPherson,
I have a question for Mr. Dudley and Mr. Carlson.
all right?
Mr. Dudley, Mr. Carlson, did you take into account private schools as well, or did you assume that their membership would stay constant over this period of time as well?
So we assumed that their membership, their enrollment would stay constant over this duration. There has been, as mentioned in some of the public comment, this shift, at least in public perception of perhaps it becomes a more relevant topic about the role that private schools play given the new public health situation that we find ourselves in. But for the purposes of this study and the data that was presented, we assumed that the private school enrollment stayed stable and consistent.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Madam Chair,
Mrs. Boyette?
Your subdivisions, you said you listed them, from the most to the smallest. I know that's a moving target. When was the last date that you had, or what was the last ending date for looking at the applications?
Yes, that would have been earlier this summer. It would have hovered around July. I can double check on that and get you harder numbers on that afterwards if you'd like.
Okay, that's fine, but yes, it would, I understand it's always going to be moving. I know there had been one more that was over 100 that would have filtered in there somewhere, but it definitely was after July. Thank you.
Okay. And that's something that we can also follow up with the local planners on as well.
As those targets keep moving and the developments keep being added, how then does that affect how we are able to make our decisions at this point? I mean, we have a lot of discussion ahead of us, but I guess it's going to plug in the very same way where you would plug in the impact area, such as the Jones area or whatever. Is that correct?
In the context, could you give me a little bit more context about
Yes,
what you mean by that?
Yes, Mrs. Boyette just said, well, I know that there was another development that had at least 100. And so as that moving target continues to move with the addition of other housing developments and all, that's going to impact the decisions that we make. But we have a general idea then as to, once we find out their location and what we see on the map currently, would help us in making whatever decisions and discussions that we have. Is that correct? As we move forward?
If I'm, and there was some static there for a moment, but if I'm following you correctly, absolutely, yes, that's correct. So,
Okay.
The sort of typical workflow that we're a part of is to do smaller contracts with districts on an annual basis, where we're able to update the land use study information and be able to give you, the most up-to-date data as possible, to be able to fill in data and information from that development inventory by reaching out again to the planning departments and incorporating everything that comes in. Just want to thank Mr. Carlson again for his work in following up the planners and doing all that organizational work to feed that into the membership forecast. But so yes, that is how that's typically structured.
All right, thank you.
Madam Chair,
Mrs. Barnes?
I had partly answered the question, but I was wondering, after their report, since they finished their report, is there any planned interaction with our board, say after we have work sessions, because we have a lot to chew on here? Was their work done?
Dr. Mills?
At this point, I think what we need to do is we need to take this information back to talk about next steps.
I cannot hear Dr. Mills.
There's some static coming from somewhere. Hold on, please. Dr. Mills's mic has died. He has to get a live mic.
Is that better, Ms. Barnes?
Yes, it is.
Okay. At this point, what I've shared is that, we got to take this back, and I think we need to have some planning sessions to talk about next steps, to look at conversations with commissioners about utilization and what our membership data looks like over time to plan. If you look at what Mr. Dell and Mr. Carlson showed us with the planned developments, that's a pinch point that's coming with anything that you do work on with the optimization that you have. So you got to hold that capacity back and make plans for that now as they come online. But I think it just shows that the hard decisions for the board won't be that there are very few options. I think the hard decision will be that there are lots of options, because there is so much space available and capacity available everywhere. I think from a planning standpoint, having some conversation about what goals are and then what any future building needs would be or building plans would be from the county would be good next steps, because it's going to take both. It's going to take both to do those things.
Yes. Thank you.
But I think ORED is, having used them in another district too, they can assist with some other things down the line. But this gives you your base information to move from for some of the conversations, because initially the conversation is what are the options that you have. So this answers the question what the options are. The options are you've got plenty. You've got plenty to choose from in terms of capacity and land use. You know what's coming, which is it's concentrated in one area. So a lot of the pinch points that would hurt you from a conversation standpoint have now been revealed. So I think the hard part is now you got to have the conversations about what your goals are.
Yes.
All right. Well, this was an informational item, and we thank the gentleman for the work that was done. We thank you for sharing this valuable information with us. And if there are no other questions from the board, we're going to thank the both of you for
Thomas and Terry, thanks.
for the time with us today.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
You're quite welcome. Thank you. Well, we look forward to setting directions and goals based upon the information that has just been shared with us to give us an idea of how we proceed over the next span of years. Thank you so much. The next item on the agenda is the National Federation of State High School Association Network School Broadcast Program.
Madam Chair, I'm going to share my screen again. 1 second.
All right.
Good. There we go. Okay.
All right.
Madam Chair, members of the board, tonight what we'd like to present for information is the National Federation of High School Athletics Network School Broadcast Program under the Pixelot system. We have 2 high schools who are wanting to enter into an agreement for this program, and we're going to go over the details of that this evening. Just a quick overview. We'll go over the service, the installation, the agreement, the price, and the payment, how they'll be paid by each school. Our 2 schools are Fike High School and Hunt High School that will be seeking this agreement with Pixelot. An overview of the service. Fike and Hunt High School have a quote and an agreement proposal for the use of the Pixelot system. In this system, the live broadcast, it is a system that provides live broadcasts of regular season athletic events in the sites that the system is installed in. The camera requires no operator, provides features that integrate with the coaching system, many recruiting options for those to be able to look at video for recruiting aspects as well. The live broadcast is a service that these 2 high schools had hoped to provide in the event that spectators may not be allowed, or whatever the ratio may be at that time. Not only that, but long-term for those who may be out of state and have family members playing in athletic events that they would like to watch their loved one play in that athletic event as well. The schools can use the platform for advertising as well. So there's a option of being able to use the platform for advertising. And beginning in year 4, the schools will also receive 10% of the revenue from Pixelot. Provided a link to the Pixelot system, and in the board packet also provided an FAQ as well as this particular presentation. In regards to the installation, there will be 2 cameras that will be installed at each school. The location of the cameras will be determined by the school. In this particular case, Fike High School will have 1 camera installed at the football stadium and 1 camera that will be installed in the main gym. So athletic events that take place in the main competition gymnasium, as well as the football stadium, will be able to be broadcast. Hunt High School will also have 1 camera installed at the football stadium and 1 camera that will be installed in the main gymnasium as well. The camera that is to be installed is on a single mount unit, so it will not impact the facility, therefore, i.e. drilling into walls, bulkheads, ceilings, things of that nature. Next slide, Dr. Gotcha. Yes, sir. In regards to the agreement, the price and the payment, the agreement is a one-time fee of $2,500. The schools will be covering these fees with their booster clubs that are providing these, both at Fike and at Hunt High School. And the agreements for both schools are included in the board packet. So you've received a copy of those as well in your board packet. Just to make sure everyone's aware, the agreements and the Pixelot system have been reviewed by our technology maintenance departments as well as our attorney. And at this point, I'd actually like to give Mr. Brandon McPherson an opportunity to speak to this. He actually was the legal counsel that negotiated the original Pixelot agreement with the state of North Carolina when it first entered into North Carolina. So I had asked Mr. McPherson to be prepared to say a few words about the system.
Can everybody hear me?
Yeah. Yes.
Fantastic. So when Dr. Williams contacted me about the Pixelot agreement and the opportunity for Wilson County to enjoy this option, it was very familiar to me because Cabarrus County Schools has been using this for the past year, and they have really enjoyed it. And it also has them well positioned during COVID-19 to be able to pipe their athletic events to folks from home. The great thing about this agreement, frankly, is that it provides passive revenue for your schools for very little, other than a service charge on each subscription that is purchased to view the games. So additionally, I think it's a fantastic opportunity for the families of student athletes, also for recruiters. They tend to have a subscription and look at players from all over. And it's an opportunity booster. One of the pieces that Dr. Williams get to in a bit is before finalizing this agreement, there will be a necessary revision to be made to the board policy 4,700 student records to include in directory information video footage from athletic events. So currently that is not listed in your directory information. However, that would be a proposal that would be coming from Dr. Williams and Dr. Wilson at some point in the very near future. I would be happy to take any questions about this, but I've seen this in action. It's come to great benefit to school districts. I had a great story about a parent who was stationed in Afghanistan who got to watch his daughter's varsity soccer games. And he would wake up at an ungodly hour to make sure that he could watch them. And it was an opportunity that was created at very little cost to a school district, but a great impact on that family. So in any event, that's, I can share more about the agreement itself, but.
Madam Chair,
Mrs. Barnes?
I've listened to the information. I read my board packet thoroughly. And as Mr. McPherson said, it is an opportunity booster. And I really do have a concern because to not have Beddingfield be able to benefit from this program really it bothered me. So I didn't know, I guess it's a two-part question, whether or not, and hope this is an appropriate time, whether there is an active booster club at Beddingfield. Because I noticed that Hunt is going to use school funds as well as the booster club. And is there any way possible we could find the funds for Beddingfield? $2,500 is not a lot of money, I don't feel, for such a great opportunity booster.
Is there a booster club at Beddingfield, Mr. Tillman?
No, ma'am, not at this time.
Okay. As part of your question, Mrs. Barnes, there is no booster club at Beddingfield at this time. So that may be why they have not been included in this.
And Madam Chair, Dr. Williams and I did reach out to Beddingfield, and they would like to pursue this at a later time.
How much later, Mr. Tillman? Because it seems that the company is going to be here installing. I don't know where the funds will come from. I know we're strapped for, funding with issues, but how much later? Because I would hate to see that athletic program not be able to benefit from such a good opportunity.
Yes, ma'am, I agree. I'm not sure. They wanted to see how it went with with Fike and Hunt first.
So are you looking at least a year off for Beddingfield if they want to look at Fike and Hunt?
Yes, ma'am.
Would the same offer at $2,500 be possible for another year, or is that just a one-time as they come into Wilson County?
At this time, Madam Chair, that is the fee for the agreement is $2,500. So it would just be dependent upon what their fee is at the time of an install for another school later down the road. But it's $2,500 now. And that's for the fee overall.
Madam Chair,
Mrs.
I
Barnes?
guess that was my question. Is it a money issue, or is it a waiting to see how it's going to work issue at the other two schools, which is more prevalent?
My understanding was it was both. They wanted to see how beneficial it would be and what kind of feedback we got. Dr. Williams did ask me to poll. I polled 12 surrounding counties, and 10 of those 12 counties had the pick-a-lot system in every one of their schools, and got nothing but positive feedback about it. The other 2 counties are in the process of pursuing it.
That's why I would hope that we could find that $2,500.
I'm sure if you presented that you were going to pay for it, then Bettyfield would become interested.
Well, who knows, we might be able to get donations from organizations just to make sure there's some more equity, if you will. Or continue that.
Madam Chairman,
Mr. Farmer.
Mr. McPherson,
Yes, sir.
how does this fit in with Title IX? You've limited to 2 cameras, one in the gymnasium and one on the football field. I was interested about your letting us know about the soldier who was able to see their child play soccer. Most people, if you don't know, a soccer pitch is very different from a football field. And in many, many cases, soccer is not played on a football field because of the turtleback situation and because it is not wide enough. In the gymnasium, you've got girls and you've got boys basketball. You've got volleyball that is predominantly girls. Of course, guys are wanting to play this more and more because it's offered in the colleges. And then you've got wrestling. It seems like to me that these cameras will be leaning a little bit heavy to the male athletes. Is this going to be a problem down the road?
No, sir, Mr. Farmer. I believe because this is an optional program, I think that traditionally for sports like cross country or golf, there's no real good location to put in video cameras. Additionally, if a school chose to, I think you would run into a Title IX issue if for some reason you chose not to play or have the cameras in use during women's athletics. But generally speaking, as long as you keep it running and there's no discriminatory intent to discriminate against women, I do not see this as a Title IX issue.
Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Mercer?
kind of dovetailing on Ms. Barnes' suggestion that organizations, I would be surprised if $2,500 could not be raised between not only the organizations, but businesses that are in that area or have owners that have attended there, if that were pursued. And which is difficult because you don't have a boosters club to organize and go out and contact those people. But I believe it could be raised without a tremendous amount of effort. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. What is the proposed timeline for, for installation of equipment at Fike and Hunt?
Madam Chair, once the agreements are sent, I believe they'll go ahead and arrange those times there. We actually do have Mr. Eddie Dahl from Hunt on the call with us, as well as Mr. Nelson Johnson, who's on the call. And I don't know if either of those gentlemen have a time frame that they may have been given once the agreement is complete and signed.
Mr. Dahl or Mr. Johnson?
The only timeline I heard was once the agreement was signed, and I understand the policy needs changing, but if the agreement was signed around now, that they felt like the pixel cameras would be installed by the start of girls volleyball season in mid-November. Again, I understand there's others.
I'm sorry, what was
That's
that?
my understanding too, Dr. Fitch.
All right. Now, this is September. Well, first of all, we cannot do anything until we have altered the policy, till we have amended our policy. Our next policy, scheduled policy review is the second Monday in October, which is October the 14th, is that correct?
That's right.
12th, October the 12th. So at any rate, there could be no contract signed before October the 12th because we have not amended our contracts, our policy. So Mr. Dahl and Mr. Johnson, this is an informational item, but you may not proceed at this point until the policies have been amended and updated, please.
Yes, ma'am, I understand.
Yes, ma'am.
They're aware.
Okay, that may give time for a drive for funding for bedding field if the principal wants to begin a process for bedding field, so that hopefully Pixelot could come in and get 3 schools instead of 2. Now, I noticed that you said that they may do advertising beginning the 4th year. This is to be a 5-year contract, if what I read was correct, under the frequently asked questions. It's a 5-year contract, is that correct? Does the contract have to be for 5 years under the special offer? And the answer is the term has to be for 5 years to be able to provide the units at no cost. So they are not able to start generating revenue prior to year 4 of the 5-year contract?
They're able to do so with the advertising, Dr. Fitch, but the 10% of, in year 4 is when they get 10% of subscriptions.
But they can begin doing.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah,
Okay.
advertising right away. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, all right.
And Madam Chair, to that point, the advertising will be of huge benefit if done appropriately, because there is adequate amount of time to advertise on the platform. And the 10% that you see in the contract, that piece of it is, okay, essentially the district has paid for the installation and Pixelot has recovered the cost by the end of year 4. That way, year 5 is a really sweet year at the end of the contract.
Okay, and after 5 years, there is no need to extend a contract with them? The schools would own the equipment, or?
So you can, more likely than not, you need to renew because they run all the broadcasting. And so they have the contract with the National Federation of High School Athletic Associations,
Okay.
who actually has the back end or the backbone of the networking and pushing it out and having it on a website that allows people to do that piece of it.
Okay.
So it would continue, but the installation costs would go.
Would be gone.
And they would continue to take a little bite of everything, but that little bite of everything is, for them having to actually run the back end of it.
Okay.
So I would expect you to have some equipment changes within that period of
Yes.
time
Absolutely.
as well, will be a part of the reason why that contract will expire then too, because that's going to go pretty fast
Well,
in this world.
I knew that with our laptops and all, and with
Same
the
thing.
equipment, I was wondering why it was a 5-year. Okay. All right. Members of the board, this was an informational item.
Madam Chairman,
Mr. Farmer.
I would like to ask Jimmy Tillman a question, please.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Tillman,
Yes, sir.
down at these football games, and of course, that is our bread and money, that is our cash cow. could be streamed to the individual at his or her home to watch their child. Is this gonna hurt the revenue of the gate at these home football games that we need so desperately?
Well, we addressed that, and from what we found out from other schools, that the advertisements, and then once you start getting 10% of the subscription, overcame that. I'm sure if you have, we got handicapped parents or relatives, or like Dr. Williams said, people out of state or out of town, that they're gonna tune in. But the information that we received from the schools that have been doing it is saying that the advertisements was very beneficial. If you remember, Mr. Farmer, we used to do booster boards. Well, now it's 2020, we're doing videos, advertisements.
Well, as a football coach, you can understand if you've got 2,000 people in the stands and they paid to get in, they're also eating your hot dogs and they're also cheering and they're giving you momentum.
Right.
If they decide to stay home, no matter what kind of fee you get on a subscription, it's not going to be the same. Do I think it's a great thing? Absolutely. But there are going to be drawbacks if not handled correctly.
Agree.
So are you saying that there needs to be some type of regulation put into play, or administrative regs put into place in regard to the utilization of this, if this actually happens?
Is that question directed to me or who?
Yes, it's directed to you, Mr. Tillman, to whomever is appropriate.
Well, I'm probably not the appropriate one, but I was a football coach and I attend many games, and I know what it's like to have the stands excited and the momentum shifting and all that happening. And now I see games on television where nobody's in the stands and you have to bring your own enthusiasm, and sometimes it don't happen. That's not speaking to the hot dogs eating and not eating, but also I just want us to go into this thing with our eyes wide open.
All right.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Mercer?
thank you. A thought come to mind with there being, one of the, cameras placed in the gym. Would that be a possible use for activities other than sports? For example, graduation, for when we only have a limited number of seats?
I believe that was one of the questions under the frequently asked questions, and the response was that they are utilizable for events other than athletic events and for things such as graduations.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Other questions or comments? Well, we have a little more time before this becomes an actuality, but changing or amending of policy at the next meeting in October will affect what happens with this. Other questions or comments? And I'm sorry, Dr. Williams, did we interrupt your presentation with the questions?
No, ma'am.
Now that we've done all of this.
I was completely finished, Dr. Fitch.
Yeah, we'll shut this down before I go to the next slide.
My apologies. Mrs. Boyette, I just saw your chat. Is your audio improved?
Yes, it is. It was earlier when Ms. Barnes was speaking, and she told you that the audio we couldn't hear, static.
Okay. May I announce your next chat comment?
Yes, ma'am. We've got a fundraiser going on.
We got a fundraiser going on, and $100 has already been pledged for a betting field. So other pledges will be greatly appreciated. And I think that $2,500 is going to get raised to make sure that betting field is not left out of the equation.
I think they're up to 6 so far.
We're up
I
to,
pledge $100 right now, Gary Farmer.
okay, I didn't see anybody in the chat, so I think I'm hearing Mr. Palmer, 100, Mrs. Boyette, 100. She let it
I
off.
raised 100.
Ms. Barnes can handle 100. That's 3. Any other takers?
I will.
Mr. Tillman is volunteering 100. Dr. Fitch is volunteering 100. That's 5. Mr. Breen
Henry
is,
Mercer.
Henry Mercer is 6. Mr. Breen is 7. Oh, I'm sorry. Excuse me.
Already sent it to Mr. Tree.
Mr. Breen has already committed $500 that he's going to be responsible for. So we are well on the way for betting field being included in this whole venture.
Madam Chair,
Yes, sir.
do I need to volunteer to hold the money?
No.
Dr. Mills said
All money must be
unequivocally
received
no.
daily. No, sir.
Mrs.
No, I say that in jest, but by the same token, where can we direct money? Or I have someone I want to speak to that I think may help. Where can we direct the money for this?
Be announced.
Probably to betting field, but we'll get that straightened out and notify you. And Ms. Powell, I didn't forget you. I heard you chime in your contribution as well. So
Yes.
we're on the roll. Mrs. Horson, I hope that you got all of the pledges included in your minutes, and so that we know who to go back to and make the contributions live.
Make
I thought you were
Make
gonna
Linda
shut
collect.
that down, Ms. Horson, what are you good for? That's good.
She's the collector.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Mercer?
Mr. Farmer can confirm this. With our pay, we can recoup that in 2 or 3 months.
We're not going there this evening, Miss.
Look at the time. Look at the time.
We're not, let's get back on track. Since we have already.
Is this on? Is this on?
Yes, it's on. Since we have already moved past where Dr. Williams was headed in his presentation and the slides were all covered, I think we can move on to the next item on the agenda,
Stop sharing this one, man.
which is the update on Wilson County Schools capital outlay projects for 2019-2020. We need to share that microphone, sir.
Let me go get off this one. Let me bring up another one to share. Hold on.
All right, Dr. Mills is gonna put up another screen sharing.
All right, hold on.
Dr. Fitch,
Yes, Mr. Farmer.
after we discuss E, could we possibly take a break?
Yes, sir, we may. Do we need to take a break while he gets that on screen now?
I'm already.
No, I can go to E.
You can go to E, okay. Is this going to be Dr. Williams and Mr. Letchworth? Members of the board, you should see on your screen Hearn roof.
These are some of the before pictures.
So some of these on the left-hand side of the screen are before, and then during the replacement, some of the metal decking that was replaced, and then some of the remainder ones are actually during the roof membrane installation, and then some of the completion portions of it.
So this is the before pictures.
But when I first looked at that, I went, oh, good, we're putting some solar panels on our roof.
No.
Unfortunately, that's not true, is it?
No.
We did do away with skylights, and there's a picture of how we solved that issue on the inside with some lighting.
All right, here's the kind of the during. This one right here is Mr. Letchworth can tell you about that. That shows all the metal they had to replace.
Yeah, a lot of metal decking that needed to be replaced.
Now, is that one of our few remaining flat roofs, or does that have a pitch now?
We built in some more slope into it as well, just like the previous ones with the insulation.
Okay.
And then the final picture.
That bottom one is the light fixture that's in the wells that the skylights used to be in. And there's actually light projecting upward and downward.
It's nice to have those skylights gone.
Was that a source of leakage?
Constantly sweating.
Yeah. It was time. They were very fragile.
Okay.
But the lighting that they came up with to replace looks really good in there.
All right.
All right. And the last update is on the wash clinic at Hunt. I'll show you before and after.
Pictures presented here on the left and the top are actually when it was a science classroom. The bottom pictures where we did the cutout for plumbing tie-ins to add a restroom and a lab facility.
And didn't y'all spend some extra time cleaning that line out?
We did.
Tell them about that.
Actually, that's lead jointed drain lines, and some of the lead that was poured in originally was stopping up part of that line. So we utilized the equipment that we have in our shop to use the camera and actually go in and take that lead out. It was over a pound of lead we pulled out of that pipe.
Ooh.
Wow. Wow.
No problem. We don't anticipate any problems now going ahead, but that would have been one. Here's during.
So that's when the walls were framed up before sheetrock and electrical was installed and plumbing.
And then here's your done.
That looks fabulous.
Doesn't that look nice?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Everything I've heard from the people that have actually seen it has been complimentary too.
It's amazing the difference going from that classroom to that in that same spot. You would never know.
Well, Mr. Letchworth, for you and your crew, you've done an outstanding job continually, and thank you for the workmanship that has gone into this project as well.
Yes, ma'am. They work very hard.
Give them our thanks for that.
It's definitely great.
Chair, that's
Anything
the end
else?
of the updates right now.
All right, let's move to the 21st Century Community Learning Center grant with the spot.
So we have,
How about the Newcomers virtual summer camp?
Did I skip over something?
I think so. I think.
Yes, I did.
Mr. Farmer put E in your mind and that you were trying to get there.
I think you might be right, whatever, but let's go back and look at the Newcomers virtual.
Everything is
summer.
Mr. Farmer's fault this evening.
Okay,
I'll be leaving you shortly.
we're not going there this evening, Mr. Farmer. Thank you very much. Newcomers virtual summer camp, please.
Dr. Fitch and members of the board, I have Ms. Robin May here to share a little bit of information about the virtual summer camp for our newcomers. It was happening during the summer when the Jumpstart program was shared. And so now that it's finished, we'd like to share a little bit of what happened with our newcomers.
All right. Ms. May?
Good evening, Madam Chair and board members. So as Dr. Wilson said, I will be sharing a little bit of information about our Newcomers virtual summer camp. We receive funds that are targeted for our newcomer students, so our students that are within their first 3 years of being in the United States. And we had planned to use this funding for a face-to-face learning camp experience during the summer, but of course, due to COVID restrictions, we were not able to hold the camp face-to-face, so we held it virtually. It was a 2-week camp experience, and we targeted our middle school and high school students because, of course, we had the Jump Start program running for our elementary students. Our students participated in some research projects. Our middle school students researched national parks, and our high school students researched the rainforest. They integrated all 4 of the language domains into their lessons: reading, writing, speaking, and listening. And the second week of the camp, the participants were able to take some virtual field trips. And then their culminating assignment was for them to present some information about the national parks and the rainforest through a flip grid video. So giving them practice with research, writing, and then speaking about the topic that they had been studying. So this was just a really exciting experience for our middle school and high school students. We had 7 regular attendees for our middle school group and 8 for high school. We had 4 EL teachers that participated in the camp. 2 teachers co-taught the middle school group, and then 2 teachers co-taught the high school group. And then the last week of the camp, we also utilized this opportunity as a professional development opportunity for our other EL teachers that were not participating. They were able to join in virtually on the class and see how the teachers that were leading this and facilitating this were able to do so virtually. So it was a great experience and a great use of our Title III funding.
All right. Members of the board, do you have any questions for Ms. May?
Madam Chair.
Mrs. Powell?
Ms. May, I was unable to actually pull up the link of the sample of the students' final project. I really wanted to see it because it was kind of exciting. You said the rainforest, so I didn't know if you could possibly send that to us or send it to me, because I would love to view the sample.
Yes, ma'am. I will certainly make sure that that link gets out to you as well as the other board members.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Other questions or comments? Thank you. Hearing none, I will now move on to the 21st Century Community Learning Center grant with the SPOT.
So we have the opportunity to partner with the SPOT as a part of the 21st Century grant. And Ms. May is going to share some information and some changes that we've had to make as a result of COVID-19.
Okay, so in the spring of 2020, the school district, in collaboration with SPOT, wrote a grant for a 21st Century Community Learning Center. We found out in June that our grant was funded. It is a $400,000 a year grant that is renewable for 3 years. The schools that we targeted in order to serve were Barnes, Hearn, Vick, Wales, and Winston, and we will be serving 3rd through 5th grade students at those schools. The original plan was to offer instructional tutoring in the afternoon at the school site from 3 to 5, and then for SPOT to pick the students up, transport them to the SPOT facility, and then SPOT would offer enrichment activities from 5 to 6:30, and then end the evening with dinner at the SPOT with parents picking up their students at 7. Of course, due to COVID restrictions, we have had to change our implementation plan. But currently, our plan is to start the program on Monday, October 5th. On a Plan B rotation, where half of the students will come week A and the other half of the students will come week B. Our services would be from 4:15 to 7, with Wilson County schools teachers providing instructional services from 4:15 to 5:30, and then Spot providing enrichment services and dinner from 5:30 to 7. So we've had to tweak the schedule a little bit due to the work hours of Wilson County School staff at this time. So we would operate under that plan until Wilson County Schools bring students back on campus. At the point at which 3 to 5 students are returned to our campuses, we would switch back to the original plan where our staff would provide tutoring services from 3 to 5 and Spot would pick up services at 5. We will be serving 12 students per grade level at each of the schools. So a total of 180 students will be served. While we are operating under this Plan B model, we will have 90 students at the Spot per week. And I just went out last week to the Spot, toured the Spot, and I met with Tracy Pittman, who's our site coordinator there, and we have identified areas for each of the tutoring groups. Of course, we will follow all of the CDC guidelines as we begin this program at the Spot. Also to note, Spot will be, in the original grant plan, Spot was going to provide transportation from each of the 5 schools to Spot at 5 o'clock. With the revised plan of implementing in a Plan B model beginning October 5th, if the students are in need of transportation from their residence to Spot in order to participate in the program, Spot will provide that transportation. So the contract for the transportation is in your board packet, and the attorneys have reviewed and approved that contract.
Ms. May, when I look at the, your cost, you show the cost for your bus drivers and your bus rentals. The Wilson County Schools teaching staff that are being utilized, are they compensated?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. So the tutors will be compensated. That is funded from the grant, as well as the enrichment facilitators that will be working at Spot. All of the funds for that compensation is included in the budget for the grant.
Okay.
And we have actually already started quite a bit of professional development with the employees who will be working with this program, and we will compensate them as well for the professional development that they've attended prior to the beginning of the program.
All right.
I have a question.
Mrs. Barnes?
Great work. I'm excited about this. As I read it, I was excited. I do have a question now, since you said that transportation parents will be responsible for picking kids up or children up at 7. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. If they,
you foresee any issues with that, I guess, to some.
You broke up and then we lost you, Mrs. Barnes.
I'm sorry. I was asking, do we see any foreseen issues with parents picking children up since the 7 o'clock hour?
yeah, so if there are hardship cases where parents cannot pick the students up, Spot will be able to provide transportation home for those students. And the site coordinators that we have hired for the program, which are Wilson County School employees, they have already started contacting the families, and we are just making a note of who needs transportation and who doesn't. But certainly if there is a need there, then we're going to make sure that that is provided.
What about the application process? I know you said that 12 students will be selected. Is there an application process? Help.
So students were selected based on their previous academic history. Principals and teachers at each of the school sites, we worked with them to come up with the list of 12 students that would be invited to the program. And of course, you know, if families turn down the invitation, then we will move on down the list and make sure that we have all 12 of the slots filled.
Thank you, and a lot of work, it seems to have gone into this, and I was really excited as I read it. Thank you.
Thank you. We're excited to see what the benefits the program will bring to our students.
Other questions or comments? We thank Mr. Mercer.
I just wanted to say how much I appreciate the innovative thoughts and actions and the effort that's gone into this, because it is great. Thank you.
Thank you, and we are very thankful to have Spot as a partner. They have been wonderful to work with during the planning of this, and again, we're excited to see what we will accomplish this year, these 180 students.
Matt is a great guy that really cares about the youth of Wilson.
He is.
All right, we thank you very much.
Madam Chair,
Mrs. Powell?
one question. I see that there's a Fun Friday enrichment activity from 4:15 to 6:30. So when we switch to or transition to Plan B, that will not be in place. It will not be a Fun Friday. Am I looking at that correct?
So the Fun Friday piece, thank you for picking that out. I forgot to mention that piece. So that will be consistent throughout the program. So our employees who are offering the instructional tutoring will be working only Monday through Thursday. Spot is taking full responsibility for the services on Friday, and they plan to have a Fun Friday where students will participate in kind of game-based experiences to practice the skills that we have worked with them on during the week.
Okay, thank you.
Right now, they're going to be working with them every day while we're still in Plan C. But when we go to, if and when we go to Plan B, they'll have an A week and a B week. So will there be activities that are planned for those that are home during either of the weeks?
Yes, ma'am. So
before you answer that, and can you address Plan A? Suppose we go to Plan A with our elementary.
Okay, so let me first address, while we're in Plan B, 6 of the students in each group will be face-to-face for instruction. The other 6 students will join instruction via Google Meet. So we are going to be engaging in reading some novels and some novel studies, and we don't want the students to miss out on any of that instruction. And so while we're operating under Plan B, we will have 6 students face-to-face and 6 students joining via Google Meet. When the district brings students back to school, if we bring students back to school, Plan A, everybody comes back to school, then we will revert back to what was originally written in our grant. So the 12 students in each grade, 3, 4, and 5, will receive face-to-face services from 3 to 5 in the afternoon, and then those students will transition to Spot for services 5 to 7. So we're just operating under this Plan B model. Right now, we're planning to start that on October 5th and to stay in that until the board decides what the next step will be.
All right. Any other questions? Hearing none, we thank you so much, and we look forward to your productive interchange and interaction with the Spot with this grant. Congratulations on acquiring this funding.
Thank you.
Members of the board, that was item E. Let's take a 5-minute break, please, and we will be back within 5. Thank you so very much. Dr. Mills. Amber, can they go?
Oh, yeah. No.
No? I tried Amber. I asked, could you all go? And he said, no. I was letting you go. You not. Thank you, ladies.
But yeah, middle school schedule, Jimmy.
Can I leave after that?
Yeah, you good after that. Yeah. Mark got to stay there.
We have hope, but it's not the same thing. So you have to look about it. How do you get about it? Oh, are you serious?
All right, I believe that everybody is back. We will resume the meeting. We are now down at our action items. We have items A through H, which takes us into our draft policies. So item A, contracts requiring board approval. Dr. Mills? Or Dr. Williams, whichever. This is for Utica,
Let me pull up my packet.
for graphic arts insurance, package renewal, and auto renewal policy, as well as a graphic arts insurance umbrella renewal. So all of these are, all are those, but
These are
they,
renewals.
meet the threshold of exceeding $90,000,
That's correct.
which require board approval. I did have a quick question. What's the difference between the graphic arts insurance package and the graphic arts insurance company umbrella renewal? What does that entail? What is there a significant difference there?
I couldn't tell you off the top of my head.
Okay.
Just trying to look on the paperwork.
The paperwork just basically says the very same thing that the précis says, but I just didn't know what the difference between an
I know there's a
umbrella.
difference, but I couldn't quote what it is. I'm sorry about that.
All right.
Madam Chair,
Mrs. Boyette?
was this an increase, decrease, or the same in the renewal?
I think it was about the same.
Was your comment that it was about the same, Dr. Mills?
I think it was about the same. I can find out in a few minutes and let you know. If you want to wait a second. And just skip to the next one. Check.
Well, let's move. He's gonna check on that, Mrs. Boyette, so if it is, but I'll ask, this has already been reviewed by attorneys?
Yeah.
It has, okay. Is Mr. Stanley still online? I see he is.
Rich, I'll check if you want us to get to the next one. I'll double back.
Members of the board, if it is your pleasure, Dr. Mills said that if we skip and go forward, he will be able to answer your question shortly, Mrs. Boyette.
Yes, that would be fine.
Okay.
Thank you. The next on the agenda then is the architecture services for the athletic tracks at Beddingfield and Hunt. You know that members of the board, we selected the firm of CPL Architect Engineering for the tracks. We just have not approved the contract for them. And so this item on the agenda is for the approval of CPL as the architecture firm. Dr. Mills, Mr. Letchworth, or Mr. McPherson, am I missing anything that needs to be brought to the attention of the board?
One thing I'll point out to the board is this is a by task contract. So as we give them tasks to do, they will charge, we will negotiate a price for each of those tasks. That way, at whatever point the scope is decided, it'll be at a a situation where the board is not disadvantaged by any change or change order in the scope, which is one of the reasons the contract's written the way it is. It's, okay, thus far, the written permissions they've been given are none because they didn't have a signed contract before. So now they'll be given a scope for the pre-work they've already done and bill for that based on this new contract date at a negotiated price. And then in the event we move forward with whatever number of lanes the board chooses or sees fit, at that point, we'll negotiate a different rate at that point. So it provides you maximum flexibility.
So it's an open cost contract because you're going to negotiate each component of what is done?
Yes, ma'am. But the board gets to decide at the point at which, whenever you decide the new task.
And because we are going back to have further discussion on whether 6-lane or 8-lane, there is not a cost assigned at this point.
Yes, ma'am.
Members of the board?
A motion?
Pardon me?
Are you ready for a motion?
Yes, ma'am.
Madam Chair, I move that we approve CPL as the architecture engineering okay, let me start over. I move that we approve the CPL architecture engineering contract for the tracks at Bedingfield and Hunt High Schools.
Second.
It has been moved by Mrs. Boyette, seconded by Mr. Breen, and who was that other voice I heard? Mrs. Powell, that we approve the contract for CPL architecture engineering firm for the tracks at Bedingfield and Hunt High Schools. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion, please give your response. Mrs. Powell?
Aye.
Mrs. Barnes?
Aye.
Mrs. Boyette?
Aye.
Mr. Breen?
Aye.
Mr. Farmer?
Aye.
Mr. Mercer? Mr. Mercer? You're on mute.
I'm sorry, I was muted. Aye.
And myself, Dr. Fitch, aye. Let the record reflect that the motion carries unanimously. Yes.
I can go back to the previous item.
All right, we're going to go back to the previous, Pracy, Mrs. Boyette, I think you asked the question.
It's actually $603 less than last year. And then the package policy covers property, general liability, crime, and inland marine, and the umbrella policy covers almost everything else.
All right. A $603
$603 less.
decrease in the cost from last year, Mrs. Powell, Mrs. Boyette.
Thank you.
You're
And this covered everything, and help me recall, is it cybersecurity, some kind of insurance we have on something with that wasn't covered in this? Do you know what I'm talking about?
I don't think, I know there's a separate rider we talked about. One was through the School Boards Association, and we did not do that one a while back.
Right.
This one, I think when we checked our coverage, there is some coverage, but I don't know the extent of it.
I think when we went with them, they, after we raised the question, they did indicate that there was some coverage for cybersecurity. I don't know the extent of the
I can pull
amount.
that and send it to the board, Ms. Boyette. I remember the conversation with the School Board Association was we looked at that and the cost was more what we wanted to spend. But I think Utica went back and Everett Lamb and them took a peek at it and to try and see what coverage we had. And I think they did some things.
I think there was an offer, that's what I couldn't recall.
Yeah,
Whether we had gone with it, I didn't see any here, so that's where my question whether, I mean, you know more about whether we need that,
Right.
but that was my question.
Right. I'll research that and follow back. I'm sorry I don't have that with me on top of it, but I'll find out, send that to the board. We can bring that next month if we needed to.
All right. So you're just going to bring the information, we still need to
You
act
still need to
upon
provide approval for
the,
this, and I can follow up
on
on the
this
cyber.
policy, on
Mhm.
this contract.
Yep.
So what is the pleasure of the board in regard to approval of this contract?
Madam Chair,
Mrs. Powell?
I move that the board approve the Graphic Arts Insurance Company Package Renewal Policy Business, the Auto Renewal Policy, and Graphic Arts Insurance Company Umbrella Renewal Policy.
Second.
It has been moved by Mrs. Powell, seconded by Mr. Mercer and Mrs. Boyette, that we approve the Utica Graphic Arts Insurance Company Package Renewal, the Business Auto Renewal, and the Graphic Arts Umbrella Renewal as presented to the administration. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor of the motion, let it be known by your response. Mrs. Powell?
Aye.
Mrs. Barnes?
Aye.
Mrs. Boyette?
Aye.
Mr. Breen?
Aye.
Mr. Farmer?
Aye.
Mr. Mercer?
Aye.
Myself, Dr. Fitch, aye. Let the record reflect that the motion carries unanimously. Next on the agenda is the contract with Barnhill Company for the new Wilson Academy of Applied Technology for Watt Building.
Madam Chair, this has been reviewed and prepared by the attorneys. It's been signed. And this does get us to where we need to be with the architect now and the construction manager at risk for the Watt project. And just as an update, we're meeting Friday with Skinner, Farlow, and Kerwin again to go through the plans that they've started developing. Mr. Letchworth, Mr. Woodard, myself, and Ms. Cox met on Friday, and we had to do a few things with some of the square footage, and we sent those in today. So that's proceeding as we speak.
Okay.
So, but this does get you in place for the construction manager.
All right. We are already under contract with Skinner Farlow, and we now need to approve the contract with Barnhill Contracting Company. What is your pleasure, or do you have any questions at this point?
Madam Chair,
Mrs. Barnes?
I move that we approve the contract with Barnhill Contracting Company for the new Wilson Applied Academy of Applied Technology.
Second.
It has been moved by Mrs. Barnes, seconded by Mr. Breen, that we approve the contract with Barnhill Contracting Company for the new Wilson Academy of Applied Technology building. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. Please record your response. Mrs. Powell?
Aye.
Mrs. Barnes?
Aye.
Mrs. Boyette?
Aye.
Mr. Breen?
Aye.
Mr. Farmer?
Aye.
Mr. Mercer?
Aye.
Myself, Dr. Fitch, aye. Let the record reflect that the motion carries unanimously. We're now, pardon me?
Ms. Barnes, I have a comment. This is just getting more and more exciting to see that we're at this crossroad and things are really coming together. Makes my heart happy.
Wonderful. It's always good when hearts can be happy. Y'all laugh, but I'm serious. 2020-2021 budget resolution, Dr. Mills.
Madam Chair, board members, Mr. Stanley is on the Zoom call, but this is the budget resolution for the year. Again, this is taking the information from what you approved, which seems like eons ago now, back when we were meeting in schools in session, and then information from the state and local, and put some onto the funds for our year, and this is the adoption of the budget resolution.
All right. Members of the board, you will see that this presentation is a little bit different. We changed finance directors, and Mr. Stanley presents in a slightly different format than Mrs. Evans. And so we are not looking at all of the fund numbers, but the fund titles are still the same. And instead of being all individual sheets per category, they are all combined within a couple of sheets. So just note that it's still the same basic information, just done in a slightly different format. Do you have any questions? Hearing none, the chair will entertain a motion for the approval of the 2020-2021 budget resolution as presented.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Mercer,
I move we approve the 2021 budget resolution as presented by the administration.
Second.
it has been moved by Mr. Mercer, seconded by, that sounded like Mrs. Barnes and Mrs. Boyette, Mrs. Powell and Mrs. Boyette. Is that correct?
Yes.
It's fine, Barnes.
That's fine.
Okay. I just need to be clear for Mrs. Horrison for her minutes.
Correct.
So that was Powell and my second voice,
Powell and Barnes. I
Powell.
want that one.
Okay, Powell and Barnes.
True.
Pardon me? Well, I didn't hear the last comment.
Said I wasn't in on that second, but I do approve.
Oh, okay, all right. It has been moved and properly seconded, moved by Mrs. Powell, seconded by Mrs. Barnes, that no, that was Mercer and Powell and Barnes. Moved by Mr. Mercer, seconded by both Mrs. Powell and Mrs. Barnes, that we approve the 2021 2020-2021 budget resolution as presented by the administration. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, please record your response. Mrs. Powell?
Aye.
Mrs. Barnes?
Aye.
Mrs. Boyette?
Aye.
Mr. Breen?
Aye.
Mr. Farmer?
Aye.
Mr. Mercer?
Uh,
Myself, Dr. Fitch, aye. Let the record reflect that the motion carries unanimously. Proposed middle school athletic tryout and game schedule. Dr. Mills and Dr. Williams.
Madam Chair, I'm gonna bring up the screen, and then Dr. Williams and Mr. Tillman can share proposal.
Well, I was happy to see that the tryouts do not begin until the beginning of the year.
All right, there you go.
Thanks, sir.
Madam Chair, you can see the schedule that we came up with. In July, we reached out to the Department of Public Instruction, which governs middle school athletics, and they gave each LEA the flexibility to do their own scheduling and determine when the sports seasons would be. And this is what we came up with. First of all, we decided just to play Wilson County schools. We felt like that would be more feasible, not traveling to Nash County or Edgecombe County, and they're going to do the same also. Because normally we're in a conference called a Tri-County Conference, which includes Wilson, Nash, and Edgecombe. But we felt like since we're going to have abbreviated schedule and we don't know what attendance or the crowd requirements will be, that we wanted to stay within the county. So we have 6 schools. We'll start our winter sports in January, the tryouts on January the 4th. We will play 10 basketball games, 10 volleyball games. 10 basketball games, and then the cross-country matches. Then we'll move to our fall sports with football and volleyball. And then we would move to our spring sports. In basketball, we would also play 10 games. In baseball and softball, we'd play 10 games. This would give us a lot of flexibility. First of all, it'd be very cost effective. It would give us a lot of flexibility if there's still some guidelines on activity buses on the number of people could be on those buses, that we could run double routes on the day of a game. For instance, if we had a football game and a cross-country game, then we could go ahead and take the transported football team and then come back and get the cross-country team. So we just felt like it was more feasible to stay within our county playing these athletic events.
Well, we certainly thank you for that, that planning and for being mindful of all that's at stake and for keeping it simple without having to try to juggle between the other two counties.
Yeah, we're just hoping we can get this plan through.
Okay.
Yeah.
Comments?
Madam Chairman.
I'm going to hear Mrs. Powell first and then you, Mr. Farmer.
Thank you.
And mine is a simple question. Well, while they're playing, Mr. Tillman, would they be wearing some type of face mask?
No, ma'am.
Okay.
Not unless they make that a requirement. As of right now, anybody who's in any competition doesn't wear a mask. And we started tryouts today with the high schools, but we are having to have social distancing, which is still 6 feet. But obviously, once we start competition, that won't be possible.
I was wondering.
Yes, ma'am. Now, the coaches,
The mask.
we'll see what the situation is at that time, and the coaches may be required to.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Farmer?
Jimmy, you're fastidious in your planning, and I'm not even worried about your scheduling, but I am. This is a voice of experience talking here. On your middle school football games, it doesn't affect anybody else. We've got a situation here. We've never had to play in the spring. We've never had to play this early. And we're dealing with something that's nature that's not going to change, and that's daylight saving time. It actually starts on March 14th. Other than that, you're in regular Eastern Standard Time. Now, what I did is I went online and I projected when the sun would go down and it would be dark. And on that first football game of 2/25, which is February 25th, it will be dark at 6:03. You know, and I know, a high school football game takes about 3 hours. A middle school game takes less than that, but it depends on if you've got a passing attack or a running attack. A running attack where both teams do primarily running, the game goes much faster. If you have a passing attack by either team, the game slows down because every incomplete pass, the clock stops. If you get one injury where you have to bring in the rescue squad and it takes 30 minutes and your game is curtailed, and that has happened to me many times, then you're in a situation on either one of these. If you start at 4 o'clock, you're going to be in a bad safety situation, because I don't think, and I may be wrong, that any of our middle schools have lights on their football fields. So
No.
I would hope that you would pass it on to the people that schedule these games. And I know it's going to take kids out of classes, especially if you have to run 2 buses to get football teams and cross country there. They're going to have to leave school early they're gonna have to start that game no later than 3:30. And it could be a problem because a lot of times the people that take up tickets, the people that run your concession stand, your chain gang are basically teachers that are teaching because school is out. They won't be able to do that and go out and do their bus responsibilities, other responsibilities. This will only happen 3 games. Now, on 2/25, the sun sets at 6:03. At March 4th, it sets at 6:10. March 11th, it sets at 6:16. Then daylight saving time starts on the 14th, and the game at the 18th becomes dark at 7:22.
Mr. Farmer,
An hour later.
Mr. Farmer, if I'm looking at this grid correctly, the dates that you are pointing out are tryouts and not actual games.
No, ma'am.
Is that,
Look at your games
Their
and go
games.
across. You're just, the top line is just tryouts. Football scheduled games would be 2/25, is that correct?
That's the way I read it.
okay, all right.
All right,
So if I'll continue with what I'm saying, is that we're okay after the 18th, but those first 3 games, we're gonna be have to be mighty careful, or we're not gonna be able to finish any of those games. It will be dark.
yes, sir, and we talked about that. I talked about that with some middle school athletic directors today. And what we're looking and doing is either we're gonna have to check with our principals and see if we can either start earlier or we'll play those games at the high school. For instance, Darden and Spate would play at Bedingfield, which we all, for those 3 weeks. And then Toys Knot and Forest Hills Forest Hills and Springfield will play at Hunt, and then Toys Knot and Elm City at Fike. Because we always try to play, they always try to play at least one of their games at the high school. So we either gonna look at playing those games at the high school or starting early.
Will that interfere with your JV schedule?
We're gonna schedule around that.
So
And it might not be, we might play the game on a Wednesday.
JV games and you'll have varsity games.
Correct. Or we might play the middle school game on a Wednesday.
10-4.
Yes, sir. But we know that this is all new and we're gonna have to make adjustments and be flexible as we go.
Thank you, sir. I knew you had it under control.
I don't know about that.
Well, thank you, because I was reading this schedule all wrong. So I appreciate that clarification. Thank you so much. Any other comments?
Madam Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I move we accept the proposed middle school athletic tryout and game schedule.
Second.
Are you accepting it or approving it?
I'm offering as a motion proposed, I accept it. I move that we accept the proposed middle school athletic tryout and game schedule.
All right. It has been moved by Mr. Farmer, seconded by Mr. Breen, that we accept the proposed middle school athletic tryout and game schedule. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, please record your response. Mrs. Powell?
Aye.
Mrs. Barnes?
Aye.
Mrs. Boyette?
Aye.
Mr. Breen?
Aye.
Mr. Farmer?
Aye.
Mr. Mercer?
Aye.
And myself, Dr. Fitch, aye. Let the record reflect that the motion carries unanimously. And I do just have one question. If the governor, or for some reason, puts us back at Schedule C, then this all becomes moot. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Thank you. Next is the National School Boards Association Magna Award entry. Members of the board, the National School Boards Association is seeking entries for their award. The focus for this year's award is equity in education. The deadline for submission is October the 30th, at which Amber says thank you. She appreciates, because if there's any award nomination to be made, that gives her time between the North Carolina School Boards Association and all these award nominations that she is handling for the end of this month, and would give her more time. Do you have any suggestions, any nominations? Hearing none, let's move on to the North Carolina School Boards Association voting delegates. Members of the board, in addition to the annual conference in November, which is going to be a virtual conference, the delegate assembly will be meeting a second time in the month of January in regard to the legislative agenda. So we are in need of voting delegates. We are entitled to 3 voting delegates who will represent Wilson County Board of Education. The floor is open for and an alternate. Thank you. The chair will entertain names for nomination for our voting delegates for the North Carolina School Boards Association Delegate Assembly, knowing that the delegates that go forth will have a second meeting to attend, and it too will be virtual. What is your pleasure?
Madam Chair,
Mrs. Boyette?
how many of us are signed up to go?
I don't think anybody has signed up at this point. I don't think the registration for the annual conference has opened as of yet. But we can see who has an intention of going. Are you intending to go virtually, Mrs. Boyette?
I don't know yet. That's what I was trying to.
Okay. Mrs. Powell, Mr. Mercer, Mrs. Barnes, Mr. Breen.
I'm doing 2 board association related legal CLEs and back-to-back weekends in October. So I think I may be school boarded out for extra school board meetings in November.
All right, Mrs. Barnes, Mrs. Powell, Mr. Mercer.
I would love to, Madam Chair, but I'm not sure about the election. Remember, I'm running for re-election. If I'm on board, I'll be happy to do it.
Mr. Mercer, Mrs. Powell.
I was planning on signing up for it, provided I didn't have any conflicts. How soon do we have to report who the delegates are?
By the 5th of October.
Mr. Mercer, you got 2 board meetings between now and then.
We got plenty of time, haven't we? I will, if, like I say, I don't know of any conflicts, but again, when in November is the meeting?
November the 5th through the 7th.
Now, the 7th's on a Saturday, isn't it?
Yes.
And they're still going to do it on a Saturday?
That's another.
Yes.
I'm gonna tell you what, that creates conflict for me.
Madam Chair,
Mrs. Powell?
yes, I'll go ahead. I see everyone's having a little difficulty with that, but I'll go ahead and volunteer to be on board.
All right. Mrs. Powell will be a voting delegate. I will be happy to be a voting delegate. That's 2 of our 3.
Now, Ms. Barnes, don't back up because you're still on the board through December.
And then I will definitely love to do it.
That's 3 and
I'll try to be an alternate, but then again, that Saturday is tough for me. It's gonna be on Saturday. I think I've got a conflict.
okay. But they didn't ask for an alternate at this point, so can we just submit the 3 names and then it's on your form? Okay. We'll put Mr. Mercer as the alternate. Thank you all so very much. Moving forward.
Dr. Fitch,
Yes, Mr. Farmer.
could I back up and ask one question about the Magna Award entry?
Yes, sir, you may.
Well, help me understand this if you would. I'm not sure how many of y'all know about Seeds of Hope, and I don't know its official relationship with the school system, even though I know it's working very closely with one of our schools. But in light of the focus being on equity in education and serving serve children and their parents and lifting the whole community up, Seeds of Hope is doing a fantastic job. So help me understand where that plugs in, or if it plugs in at all.
Mr. Mercer, I'm not exactly.
Mr. Farmer.
I'm sorry. Thank you. Mr. Farmer, I'm not absolutely certain where that falls in, if it has to be. Okay, thank you. Directly out of the school, or if it can be an affiliate community entity. I'm sure we could get some clarification on that. If you want to make a motion for the off chance that it can be submitted, because it would take board action, and we would need to do this now in order to meet the deadline, which was October the, we have October the 30th. But that would, our board meeting would put us relatively close, and I'm not sure that Amber would have enough time. So if you want to make a motion that would allow, if it's permissible for a community entity to receive that nomination, we could go ahead and have that and get that clarification from the National Association, and she would have time to work on that without having to rush it at the last minute.
Yes, ma'am. Should I put that in the form of a motion, and would you help me, please?
I will gladly take that as a motion at this point.
Okay, I'd like to move that Seeds of Hope be an award entry to the National School Boards Association Magna Awards.
If they qualify for consideration.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
All right.
Second.
It has been moved by Mr. Farmer, seconded by Mr. Mercer, that we submit Seeds of Hope to the National School Boards Association for the Magna Award entry, should they be eligible for consideration. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor of the motion, please respond. Mrs. Powell,
Aye.
Mrs. Barnes,
Aye.
Mrs. Boyette,
Aye.
Mr. Breen,
Aye.
Mr. Farmer,
Aye.
Mr. Mercer,
Uh,
myself, Dr. Fitch, aye. Let the record reflect that the motion carries unanimously, and we will check to see if they are eligible for consideration. Let me go back for a moment. We did the volunteering to be voting delegates, but we did not take official board action. So the chair will entertain a motion approving the stated board members for voting delegates for the delegate assembly. The floor is open.
It was Dr. Fitch, Ms. Powell, and
Ms. Barnes.
And Ms. Barnes.
Mhm.
Madam Chair, I move that our 3 delegates for the North Carolina School Board Association voting delegates be Dr. Fitch, Ms. Powell, and Ms. Barnes, with Mr. Mercer being the alternate.
All right.
second.
It has been moved by Mr. Breen, seconded by Mr. Mercer, that the voting delegates be myself, Dr. Fitch, Mrs. Powell, Mrs. Barnes, and Mr. Mercer as the alternate for the North Carolina School Boards Association voting delegates for the delegate assembly. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor of the motion, please respond. Mrs. Powell,
Aye.
Mrs. Barnes,
Aye.
Mrs. Boyette,
Aye.
Mr. Breen,
Aye.
Mr. Farmer,
Aye.
Mr. Mercer,
Uh,
myself, Dr. Fitch, aye. Let the record reflect that the motion carries unanimously. Now we're at the draft policies, draft and revised policies. What is your pleasure, members of the board?
I'd like to handle them all in one go.
All right, is that a consensus that you would like to handle them all at one go? One fell
Yes.
swoop?
Aye.
All right, that is how we will handle those.
Madam Chair.
Madam Chair.
Everybody wants to speak at once on that one. All right, shall you defer to the lady, Mr. Breen, or since you started, do you want to move on
I
that?
will always defer to Ms. Boyd.
Ms. Boyette, Mr. Breen is deferring to you.
Okay, I move that the board approve the policies listed on the agenda under Roman numeral 7, discussion action items, letter H, draft and revised policies 1 through 19 as a second reading, and repeal the corresponding old policies as set forth in the handout dated September 21st, 2020.
Second.
It has been moved by Mrs. Boyette,
Like a
seconded
boss.
by Mr.
Sorry. That was good.
Seconded by Mr. Breen, that the board approve the policies listed on the agenda under Roman numeral 7, discussion action items, letter H, draft and revised policies 1 through 19 as a second reading, and repeal the corresponding old policies as set forth in the handout dated September 21st, 2020. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor of the motion, please respond. Mrs. Powell,
Aye.
Mrs. Barnes,
Aye.
Mrs. Boyette,
Aye.
Mr. Breen,
Aye.
Mr. Farmer,
Aye.
Mr. Mercer, myself, Dr. Fitch, aye. Let the record reflect that the motion carries unanimously.
Madam Chair,
Mrs. Barnes?
I do want the board to know that I did go back to the concussion policy and watch the video. It was quite interesting. Very good video.
You did go back and watch the concussion video and what?
Yes, we had talked about that
Yes.
at our policy meeting. It's really interesting. I enjoyed watching it.
All right. Thank you so much. Mr. Mercer, Mr. Farmer.
Madam Chairman,
Yes.
I move the Wilson County Board of Education go into closed session, consider confidential personnel matters as provided in North Carolina General Statutes 143-318.11A1 and 6 and 115C-319 through 321 to consider confidential student matters as provided in North Carolina General Statutes 143-318.11A1 and North Carolina General Statutes 115C-402 and the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act of 20 U.S. Code 1232G to establish or give instructions concerning the Board of Education's negotiating position concerning a potential acquisition and or lease of real property as provided in North Carolina General Statutes 143-318.11A5 and to consult with the Board of Education attorney and preserve the attorney-client privilege as provided in North Carolina General Statutes 143-318.11A3.
I second.
It has been moved by Mr. Farmer, seconded by Mrs. Barnes, that the Wilson County Board of Education go into closed session to consider confidential personnel matters as provided in North Carolina General Statutes 143-318.11A1 and 6 and 115C-319 through 321. To consider confidential student matters as provided in North Carolina General Statutes 143-318.11A1 and North Carolina General Statutes 115C-402 and the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act 20 United States Code 1232G to establish or give instructions concerning the Board of Education's negotiating position concerning a potential acquisition and or lease of real property as provided in North Carolina General Statutes 143-318.11A5 and to consult with the Board of Education attorney and preserve the attorney-client privilege as provided in North Carolina General Statutes 143-318.11A3. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, please cast your vote. Mrs. Powell?
Aye.
Mrs. Barnes?
Aye.
Mrs. Boyette?
Aye.
Mr. Breen?
Aye.
Mr. Farmer?
Aye.
Mr. Mercer? Myself, Dr. Fitch, aye. Let the record reflect that the motion carries unanimously. We are now adjourned to closed session.